Welcome, new supporters, Oaken and Isaac. Thank you for your support. It is much appreciated. Hello, travelers. Boardman21 here, and today's build is a Shaman that's based around not using avalanche at all. Now, that does mean you're losing your biggest, best DPS skill on the Shaman, but it also means that we're going to be able to use some other skills. So we're going to base it around a lot of auto casting, a lot of insta casting. We're going to use Warcry and Maelstrom. We're going to have Warcry that's proccing a lot of Maelstroms for us, and because we're stacking so many Maelstroms and we're using it as an insta-cast so you never really have to stop for it, we're able to stack not only a lot of damage over time, but we use Maelstrom to give us a lot of health healed every second. In fact, we can get up to 500, 600, 700 depending on how you do idols. 700 health healed per second, which keeps you at full life. It increases your survivability by a lot, and it allows you to do empowered content while just flying through the maps. Now, your DPS will be a little bit lower. You can definitely trade down a skill and put avalanche back in the mix. You will have to work around mana and change it up a little bit. It will turn it into an avalanche build, but you'll do more damage that way. But with this, you can just run around and let everything die in your damage over time from both Maelstrom and Tornado, and then at the same time you'll have Ice Thorns going out, which will be doing some hit damage, but that's not where we're doing most of our damage from. You will have between 15 and 20 stacks of Maelstrom at all times, so it will be doing pretty good damage. You'll be getting 2,000 to 3,000 damage ticks on the enemies at level 100 content, and that includes bosses. There are no uniques required in this build. It does take a little bit of gearing to get it going, mostly just getting a lot of elemental damage over time, and then of course working on your resistances. This will work with using an idol procced idol or a Thorn Totem procced idol so that you can get the 5 Thorn Totems that will cover all of your elemental and your physical resistance. So it's a lot easier on this build than a lot of others to be able to get your resistances all capped, and therefore your survivability is much higher. You also get, of course, the damage reduction from nearby enemies. You have the Berserker for when you get low life. You'll have Endurance, since this is a full life build, we'll build into that. And then of course you're being healed by a lot. You'll have a little bit of Leech, and you'll also have the Boar Heart, so if you get hit by a melee attack, you'll get that extra 30% damage reduction. Alright, let's go ahead and get into the skills, the interactions, and just how all this works. For skills, I'm running Warcry, Tornado, Ice Thorns, Maelstrom, and Summon Thorn Totem. For Warcry, we have this set up to go off every 5 seconds. It's going to heal you, it's going to cleanse your ailments, and it's going to give you 250% increased cold damage, which will really boost your damage. It'll give that to you for 4 seconds every 5 seconds when it goes off, so you'll have 80% uptime of it. We got 1 point in Deep War, 1 point in Jumon's Wrath, 5 points in Frost Claw, 1 point in Juggernaut, so you're invulnerable for 1 second after you cast it. 2 points in Breath of Edera. This heals you for 200, so you get healed for 200 health every 5 seconds when it goes off. 1 point in Purging Shout. This cleanses all ailments on you, whether you're bleeding, poisoned, slowed, chilled, doesn't matter. 1 point in Staggering War. This has some knockback distance added to it, so when you hit your enemies, you'll push them further back. 1 point in Kinetic Scream. 2 points in Shredding Howl. This now applies 2 stacks of bleed to all enemies that it hits. And 1 point in Shallow Breath reduces the cooldown by 50%, so from 10 seconds down to 5 seconds, so it's going off more often. But it no longer stuns, freezes, or fears, which is fine. It'll still do the knockback, and this will allow you to have 80% uptime of your buffs, like the increased cold damage, instead of only 40% uptime. On top of that, this also means you get healed more often, and you cleanse your ailments that are on you more often. Then we have Tornado, and Tornado is set up to be a fire tornado that also gives us the aspect of the storm buff. So we got 1 point in Aspect of the Storm. Aspect of the Storm gives you a 2-second buff, which grants 10% increased move speed. So we'll be a little bit faster. This is a bit of a speedrunning build. Then we have 4 points in Gust of Renewal. This gives you 60% mana efficiency with Tornado, so it's cheaper to cast. And this will also give you 12% mana regen, so your overall mana regen will be higher. Even though it doesn't outperform the actual cost of Tornado, it technically makes it cheaper to run it as well. Then we got 1 point in Storm Dervish, so when you do have the aspect of the storm, so for that 2 seconds, you gain 7% more attack speed and cast speed. Neither of these matter because nothing we're using really needs that. Warcry is the only exception. And 3 points in Swift Wings gives the aspect of the storm duration a 90% increase, so you're now at about a 3.8, 3.9 second duration, almost 4 seconds. That's important because the cooldown of this skill is going to be 4 seconds, which means you have just about 100% uptime of these buffs. Then we got 1 point in Stormbringer for more cast speed. Tornado is an instacast, so this doesn't help us. That 1 point is just to unlock the Fire Tornado, where it converts all of that physical damage into fire damage. This is important, and the reason we go to fire damage is because we're running a lot of elemental damage over time, and physical does not fall in the elemental category. So we convert it to fire, and this also gives it a 10% more damage modifier. We got 3 points in Lasting Storm, 4 points in Hurricane, 1 point in Eye of the Storm. This allows the tornado to attach to you, so everywhere you go, you're basically going to be in the eye of the storm. And then this increases the damage it does with a 100% more modifier. You can no longer have more than one tornado, but that's fine. 1 point in Snapgale turns it into an instacast, another 10% more dodge damage modifier, and now it has a 4-second cooldown. The reason that's important is that 4-second cooldown means you have to cast it the least amount as possible. It's an instacast, so it doesn't stop you when it does cast, but now you'll have the 100% uptime of aspect of the storm by having it go off every 4 seconds, and then of course having your buff last 3.9 seconds or so. Then we have Ice Thorns. Because we're wearing a two-handed weapon, Ice Thorns is free to us. We turn it into an instacast, means you don't have to stop to cast it, and it costs you no mana. It's a win-win situation here. We got 1 point in Emblem of Might. This makes it free as long as you have a two-handed weapon. 2 points in Frost Root Storm. Increases the projectiles it fires out by 2. It also increases the mana cost by 2. But 0 plus 0 when it's free, it's 0. I should say 2 times 0 is still 0, even though it's an additional thing. Anyways, 3 points in Anemophily gives it speed and range. 1 point in Thorn Shield turns it into an Ice Thorn Shield that gives you plus 40 armor for 1 second after you cast it. This does not make it no longer do damage. You get a shield, and then the shield, which is around you for 1 second, then shoots out like normal Ice Thorns would, and then goes and hits enemies. All it means is you're basically delaying the attack for 1 second, but in that 1 second you have additional armor. Then we have 4 points in Bulb Shield, so there's a 40% chance to recast it. This really should just say a double cast, because what's happening is when you cast it, there's a 40% chance it's just cast twice, which is a recast or a double cast or however you want to word it. This doesn't mean anything outside of that. This doesn't mean that it'll take more time or mana or whatever it would be. It's actually just an instant thing that happens. Then we got 1 point in Second Nature. This turns it into an instacast with a 4-second cooldown. 6 points in Floric Tides has a 300% increased cooldown recovery time, as well as now it's going to give you critical strike avoidance. We already have 100% critical strike avoidance on our build. If you don't have 100% critical strike avoidance, you can get that from here. You will guaranteed have at least one of these active at all times, which means you can count this as 30% critical strike avoidance. It actually give you up to 120, 150% critical strike avoidance if you get a recast on like 3 in a row, but you won't have 100% uptime of that. We then got 2 points in Bark Shield for more armor, so each shield's going to give us 80 armor now, and that's going to be it for this skill. Then we have Maelstrom. Maelstrom is going to be the main damaging skill in this build, and it's not going to be super damaging, but it does do good damage. We got 3 points in Whirlpool. This increases the duration of each stack of Maelstrom by 60%. We have 3 points in Sleep-Footed. We now get 45 flat dodge rating. The reason this is important is we have built into and have blessings of % increased dodge rating, and because we're running such a high amount of stacks of Maelstrom, you actually get quite a bit of dodge with this. Then we got 4 points in Calm for the mana efficiency. You need it to be cheap because of how many times it's going off. It will take all of your mana, so we have this build perfectly equalized to have enough mana regen to be able to put all of these skills on autocast, and that number is 19.25 mana per second. So you got to be right on the money with getting a tier 5 mana regen on 3 slots of gear and having mana efficiency on a few things. You can do other things like have Tempest Strike in your slot instead of Leap, and you can get your mana back that way, but you'll be a little bit slower if you do that as you work towards getting to the full-fledged autocasting mana equalized build like we have here. And then we got 2 points in Arctic Blast, 1 point in Sudden Gale. This turns it into an instacast for a plus 10 mana. It has a 2-second cooldown, but this allows you to put it on autocast, which will instacast it. Doesn't stop you at all. You can get like 6 to 7 stacks on your own, but because we're having Warcry go off, and Warcry is actually going to shoot out 4 Maelstroms every time that we cast it, it's going to allow us to stack much higher than that 6. You'll be able to get to 15 to 19, get 20 stacks of it sometimes, and there's other places where you can get more. If you go into the passives or wear idols that give you more chance of casting it every second, or the relic that does it, you can get even higher, but you'll run into mana issues if you have it going off too much. We then also have 2 points at Arctic Chill and 3 points in Healing Winds, and this is the big one right here. This is what your survivability is based on. Not only are you going to have about 50% dodge, which is a good survivability thing from the Sleep-Footed, but you're also going to be healed for 6 health per second. Now that doesn't sound like much, but that's per stack. If you have 20 stacks of Maelstrom, if you multiply that times the 6 healing per second, that means you're now healed for 120 health per second. On top of that, that is affected by healing effectiveness, and you can easily get 300%, 400%, 500% healing effectiveness. Really depends how many idols you want to run. There are 2x2 idols. Each one of them can have up to 105% healing effectiveness. If you run 4 of those, that's 420% healing effectiveness. Weird how it adds up to that. Don't dig into that too much. But 420% healing effectiveness will give you a total of 480 health plus the 120, so you have 600 health per second being healed at that 420% healing effectiveness. I think that's right. I'm a little off on the numbers on that. But you can also get healing effectiveness on gear and in passives in a couple of free slots. So you can get 600 health just from idols. You can get above and beyond that with more healing effectiveness from passives and your gear. You can get up to 1,000% health healed, or not percent, but 1,000 flat health healed every second without even getting into the exalted realm. But you will have to change passives around and have some perfectly rolled idols. If you get into exalted and add healing effectiveness on a couple of pieces there, you can actually get over 1,000 health healed per second, which is absolutely crazy. It means all of your health is healed per second, and on top of that, you'll still be leeching. Then for Summon Thorn Totem, we have this set up to proc. We have some idols. This is why you can't run 4 of the healing effectiveness idols, and why we're only running 2, is you need at least one 1x4 that has a percent chance to proc Thorn Totems when you do a hit. The only skill doing hits, Ice Thorns and Warcry. But because we have 2 idols that have the Thorn percent, you still proc them enough to get 100% uptime of the Thorn Totems. The reason Thorn Totems are important is because you have 5 of them, and this is how we get our physical and our elemental resist, thanks to the passive that gives us 15% of those resistances per totem we have, and we'll have 5 Thorn Totems when it procs. They have a long enough duration that you'll proc them again before they disappear. So we got 4 points in Forested Expanse, 3 points in Eternal Forest, 1 point in Grove Mind, 1 point in Ancient Power, 3 points in Impale, 5 points in Shred Armor, and 3 points in Winged Thorns. For passives, I got 25 points in the Primalist base class, with 8 points in Natural Attunement, 1 point in Gift of the Wilderness, 5 points in Hunter's Restoration, 6 points in Wisdom of the Wild, and 5 points in Berserker. If you're asking why the 5 points in Berserker, it's not that we're doing melee damage, and it's not that we're running a low life build, but when you do get to low life, when you take a big hit and your life is reduced to 35% or below, you will take an additional 30% less damage. And I shouldn't say additional, it's a multiplicative less damage, but it will still help your survivability because you'll have Endurance and Berserker basically kick in at the same time. This is going to allow for a huge damage reduction, which not only wards off the one-shots, but is going to allow you to survive just long enough for that 1 second to go by, so that all of your health is healed back from Maelstrom and all of that healing. We got 10 points in Beastmaster with 8 points in You're Saying Strength. This gives you 8 strength. It also lets you take 16% less damage from nearby enemies. 2 points in Boreheart makes it to where when you get hit by a melee attack, you then get an additional multiplicative 15% less damage taken for Boreheart for 2 seconds with a 2-second cooldown. So it is possible to get 100% uptime of that as long as you keep taking melee hits and you get hit perfectly timed to have it reactivate at the end of a cooldown. I would assume there'd be some hits in there though that count without that damage reduction on it, but you can put more points in this if you want. Points were very tight in this build. For Druid, we got 24 points, 6 of them in Blood Claws, 7 of them in Bark Skin, 7 of them in Veil Warrior. This is for the healing effectiveness, and 4 points in Blossoming Vines for more healing effectiveness. And then in the Shaman, the Master class, we've got 54 points, 8 of them in Shamanic Infusion, 8 of them in Ancient Stones, 4 of them in Windbringer, 5 of them in Shattered Heavens, 5 in Protective Circle. This is what will give you all of your resistance for elemental and physical. 8 points in Ruin of Awe for that adaptive spell damage, 8 points in Elemental Shrines for that mana regen, and 8 points in Ascendant Circle so that you get 32% increased spell damage per active totem. With 5 of them, this will be 160% spell damage, which is a lot of spell damage for just 8 points. Then for our idols, our items, and our blessings. For idols, there are 2 types of idols that you want. You want chance to summon a Thorn Totem on a hit, and you want healing effectiveness, which they roll up to 100%. You can also get all of your poison resist covered this way if you get the same affixes that I have. With this, the healing effectiveness will make you have much better survivability, and just 1 or 2 idols for the chance to summon a Thorn Totem is all you need for this build to get 100% of them. You'll have Ice Thorns going off so much in Warcry that you're guaranteed to get in some hits, and you'll be able to summon those enough to have 100% uptime of them. This is a no unique required build. We're wearing no uniques. There are uniques that you can wear. If you have the Wings of Argentus, which I try not to put that in too many builds because it's a very rare piece and hard to get. You have to run an empowered mono quite a few times to get it, but once you have it, you can swap it through all your characters. If you have the Wings of Argentus, it is very powerful in this build. It will give you an additional multiplicative 40% damage reduction to what you already have, which means that your survivability shoots way up. You take way less damage, and you can throw that on the chest. Our chest has attunement, cold damage, increased dodge rating, and necrotic resistance. It's not something that is mandatory. There's nothing here that is mandatory, so you can for sure swap those and wear that unique and take less damage. Other items, we are wearing a 2-handed staff. I'm just going to hover on the rest of these just so that you can see them. They will be in the build planner, so if you go down in the description, there's a link to the written guide. In the written guide, we'll have the links to the Lootfilter. It'll have the build planner. It'll also have everything else, screenshots of the skills, everything that you would need to basically have a written guide version of this and be able to put it together without even watching this video. For blessings, same thing. I'm just going to hover all of these. None of these are make or break. There is a % increased dodge rating you can get here. There is endurance threshold, so those are really nice for really min-maxing your survivability. Alright, for the character sheet, as you can see, we have about 1500 health. We don't have a whole lot of health regen, but our mana regeneration is 18. When we have the tornado active, this will go up to 19. You need to have that much mana regen. You need at least 18, roughly 19, in order to hit that equalization between mana being spent on all of your skills on autocast and your skills being not able to be autocasted because you're going to eventually go into the negative mana. Now, what you can do as you work towards that, you cannot put Warcry on autocast and just cast it when you want. That means you won't get it every 5 seconds and you won't need it, but it'll save you enough mana that you can run just the Maelstrom and Tornado with it, and that will allow you to only have 14 to 15 mana regen, which means between your passives and Tornado, you only need to have a couple of affixes at tier 1, tier 2 on your gear, or if you have it on 3 pieces, if you just have tier 1 on 3 pieces, that'll be enough to get you going and not go into the negative mana, but you won't be able to cast Warcry. But as you get those tiers up, you get to tier 2, tier 3, or find a piece that's exalted, you'll almost instantly be able to run this build as is. Now, you're going to say, oh, you're not capped on resistances. Again, all of the elemental and the physical is going to come when you're doing hits and you proc the Thorn Totems. We'll throw those out there. You'll see we cap on all of those. The only thing we're a little shy on is necrotic, and if you do go with the Wings of Argentus, if you take that chest piece, which is where I put my necrotic resistance, you'll have to get necrotic resistance somewhere else. I would do that with the critical strike avoidance. Because we have Ice Thorns going off, our critical strike avoidance is actually higher than it needs to be. You can get rid of 1 or 2 of those affixes and then put on necrotic in those spots to cap that out. We got 21% armor, and then our dodge, we have 7%. Again, this dodge is going to jump up. Now, I don't have the blessing on this character for increased dodge rating, so it's not min-maxed here. But just to give you an idea of how high it's going to go, we're just going to put all of our skills on autocast here so that we can start stacking, and you'll see we'll get up to about 20 stacks here as we continue on here and get to the max point. And you'll notice that our dodge rating right after this next Warcry right there, 47% is about where I stay on this build, between 40 and 50% dodge rating. If I had increased dodge rating as a blessing, that's another 70% increase. We'd hit that 50% marker, and you'd go over a little bit, 51, 52%, no problem. If you also take the passive that has a chance to proc Maelstrom every second, if you put on idols that have a chance to proc Maelstrom every second, you're going to be able to get even more stacks, and that dodge will go even higher. You can get up to about 65% dodge, about max, until you get into Exalted, and you can get even higher. You can get 70% dodge on this character, which is extremely powerful, and your healing at that point would even be better. The other stats we have here, just a normal 200% crit multiplier. We're not building into crit. This is a dot. We got about 350% spell damage and 122% cold damage. Now, these do go up when you have the totems. If I throw out my 5 totems again, you'll notice we get to 500% spell damage, and then it doesn't show up, but we have the elemental damage over time. It does show regular damage over time. This doesn't reflect elemental damage over time, but our elemental damage over time is what we have a lot of affixes on our gear, and we actually have it quite high. We have about 300 to 400% of it. For defense stats, we got our 60% endurance, we have a 500 threshold, and then you can see our critical strike avoidance. I normally have 100%, but because Ice Thorns is going off, we get another 30% for the bulb shield. So you'll see we jump from 107 to 137, even 167, or even higher. So like I said, you can remove 30% from your gear, and you'd be fine if you got rid of one of your affixes. And you could throw necrotic into that spot. Alright, for how to play this build, so like I have here, I put my Ice Thorns on autocast, my Warcry on autocast, and my Maelstrom on autocast. Again, you will need to have at least 18 to 19 mana per second. My calculated cost for these skills, when I add in the Tornado as well, is 19.25. 19 and a quarter mana per second is being spent on average, which means you must have mana regen of 19 and a quarter or better to not slowly dwindle down. The other things that you can do here, if you are having mana problems, you can throw Tempest Strike. You do not need the Summon Thorn Totem on your skill bar. I like to put Leap so that I can move a little faster through, but I don't find myself using it. But you can throw Tempest Strike on here and use Tempest Strike and put the passive points in to get mana back on use of Tempest Strike. This will slow you down. You won't be a speedrunning build, but it will give you mana back to where you can, until you get the right mana regen affixes, you can still use this build and still function with all of it on autocast. You'll just have to use Tempest Strike and swing it at the air a few times. And then for the damage of this build, I'm just going to hover over it. You can see that we're hitting the training dummy for almost 20,000 damage over time, especially when you have the Warcry go off and you get that increased cold damage. We're sitting, I think, about 18,000. There's a 22,000 damage tick in there. But that's about where you sit for damage. It's not a lot. We're not talking 100,000 damage here. But it's enough to do 2 to 3k ticks on level 100 content, including bosses, which is enough to dwindle them down over time. And again, this is a build where you don't have to stop. All of these are on autocast. Warcry is the only thing that will stutter step you, and again, you don't have to have it going off. You could run this as just the Tornado, Ice Thorns, Maelstrom build. It'll save you a little bit of mana, but you will lose that increased cold damage, and you can just run around with this and just keep going. Again, Wings of Argentus, a great unique, not wearing it in this because it's hard to get, and I already have a few builds with it, but since you're not ever stopping, you get that damage reduction. You also get +1 to fire skills, I believe, with it, which means that your Fire Tornado will get +1 levels, which means you get 1 extra point to spend in there as well, which is a nice little added bonus. Alright, that's going to be it for this build guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you like the look of the Fire Tornado. It's why I went with Fire, not only because, you know, it's elemental damage over time, but because it just looks sick. And it's been a while since we've messed with it. Hopefully they expand upon the Fire a little bit for the Shaman. It lacks a lot of Fire stuff. I'm hoping, and I've asked before for it, but they just really think it's too outside of the thematic feel of the cold and physical Shaman. But hopefully it gets some more fire love in the future. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. That's all I want. But again, that's it for this build guide. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And as always, stay safe, travelers.